This is Consumer Friend.
Hello and welcome back to the Consumer Friend podcast. At Consumer Friend, we pride ourselves on raising awareness of your consumer rights to anyone that will listen, giving you the knowledge on how to get the best deal when you're buying goods, services and digital content. We also promote plain English and how to make your home more energy efficient. We do all this through our website at consumerfriend.org.uk and on these podcasts. Please like, subscribe, review and follow us on socials. Now, we've spoken at great length on what to do if it all goes wrong and the best way to complain to a business if the product or service isn't what you wanted or expected or was just outright wrong, and what to ask for and what you're entitled to. But today we're going to talk about what to do if you and the business cannot reach an agreement. Where do you go from there? Well, all is not lost. There are extra protections for you lucky lot here in the UK. A lot of industries have some sort of dispute resolution service that goes by the name of an ombudsman. And today I am delighted to introduce Kevin from Dispute Resolution Ombudsman Service. But first, before we do that, I'm just going to introduce little Lou Bax. Hi Lou, how are you?
I am good, Adam. How are you now that January's over?
Oh my God, January was the worst. I hated every single second of it. I am so glad January is now over. I sat in January and I embraced the loneliness and the miserableness of it all, and I'm now out of the funk.
Do you think you maybe did that to yourself a little bit?
I almost certainly did that to myself. I very much accept January for what it is.
Right, I've got a couple of riddles for you. Now, me and Adam played this game quite a lot. I put a riddle or a maths challenge or like a joke in my kids' lunchboxes every day. They are nearly 14, but she still likes it, so she tells me. So I've got a riddle for you, Adam. One of them, right. Which letter of the alphabet has the most water?
Me thinking doesn't make for a good podcast, does it?
No.
Which letter?
When it gets too uncomfortable, when the silence is becoming uncomfortable.
Which letter has the most water?
If you don't know, Kevin can jump in.
C!
Yes!
Oh, dear.
Excellent. Right, now more on to the serious things on how we complain about things and how we get our situations resolved.
Lovely, thank you very much. I am delighted to introduce Kevin Grix from the Dispute Resolution Ombudsman Service. Have I pronounced your name right?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. And it's great to be here, Louise and Adam. Thanks for having me on the podcast. Big fan. First question for you guys, though, is when do I qualify for one of those little digital shaky heads that I always see on LinkedIn? Because
well, we could do that, couldn't we? We could look at this.
An animated Kevin. I love it. I love the idea.
Animated Kevin. We were quite excited. I'm still not quite. When we did the animations, Adam still takes a mickey out of me because I asked for more longer eyelashes and a suggestion of arm muscle.
I'll take the arm muscles.
I said, can you make my ears a bit smaller, please?
They went, no, not possible. Be misleading. If we did that, would be misleading the public, which is not what you're about.
So, Kevin, thank you so much, Kevin, for coming today. The first question I have is ombudsman, the name ombudsman. Do you have to be a man to be an ombudsman? Don't you know it's 2024? Haven't you seen the Barbie movie yet?
The Barbie movie is actually on repeat at the moment in my house, so I've seen clips of it. I think actually there's an important point. The ombudsman brand or the ombudsman word is quite problematic because it's quite difficult for a lot of people to pronounce, and there is a concern actually that the name is a bit of a barrier to using ombudsman schemes because people are afraid to say it. There's actually a lot of academic debate around whether or not ombudsman means man or whether in fact it's gender neutral at all. You'll see some schemes now don't even use ombudsman anymore. They use ombuds as an alternative. But very, very proud to say that we've got lots of men and women as ombudsman, dispute resolution ombudsman. So for us, as long as you're good enough to do the job, gender is not an issue for us in any way, shape or form.
Perfect. I won't start the petition for Ombudswoman Service then. That's absolutely fine. It's good to know. Thank you very much. So what does the Dispute Resolution Ombudsman Service actually do?
Okay, so I stand over actually 4 different ombudsman schemes in this country, and we work across a range of different sectors. So I stand over the Furniture and Home Improvement Ombudsman, which, as the name suggests, helps to resolve disputes within the furniture and home improvement sector, whether that's retail or through the various trade associations which are signed up. I also stand over Dispute Resolution Ombudsman, which is a scheme which isn't specific to a sector. So as you guys and some of the listeners will know, that there are ombudsman schemes for lots and lots of sectors, but some sectors don't have an ombudsman specific to it. So Dispute Resolution Ombudsman is a scheme which companies can sign up to voluntarily to effectively give their customers and their consumers access to a scheme. I also stand over the Rail Ombudsman, which all train operating companies are signed up to in this country. And I stand over the Independent Football Ombudsman as well, which is funded by the Premier League, the FA and the EFL, under which all Premier League and Football League clubs stand under the scheme.
Perfect. So in terms of that second one that you're talking about businesses signing up where they have no ombudsman service, what's the incentive for those businesses to sign up with an ombudsman service?
I think that it comes down to, well, there's lots and lots of different things actually, and I think my experience over the years of talking to different companies, the ombudsman does different things for different companies. First and foremost, I think that I'm the son of a retail family, so my great grandfather, my grandfather, and my dad ran retail businesses, and I think if you was to talk to any of them, it's about giving customers choice. So although in this country dispute resolution ADR isn't mandatory, I think what it does do is if you do fall out of, or if there are issues between you and the customer, having access for, or providing free access to your customer to a dispute resolution body gives that customer a choice that maybe they wouldn't have if the company didn't take that decision. So, but outside of that, obviously, through our dispute resolution work, we train, which helps to raise standards. So we give companies insights into their practices and their procedures that they might not otherwise have had. And there's learnings, obviously. Companies, by and large, do want to get it right for their customers. And I think that access to an ombudsman, whether it's the ombudsman that I stand over or any of the other ombudsmen in the country, gives senior leaders a slightly different lens through which to view their company and what they do for their customers.
So just on that, I got distracted by you going, I'm the son of a, and I was like, a preacher man. That's where I went with that. With the word ombudsman, again, I know I'm not talking it from a gender specific, but it's not a word that the general public will understand. So where we're sort of playing English champions, and if you think the average UK consumer has a reading age of between 9 and 12, most consumers won't really understand what the word ombudsman means. So in simple speak, it's a way for consumers to get something sorted out if they can't get it sorted out with the person they bought it from.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So the word derives, it's an old Scandinavian word. What it really means, or what it traditionally meant during the medieval times, was the ombudsman was almost one of the king's representatives. So if there was an issue in a town or in one of the villages, instead of petitioning the king, you went to the ombudsman, whether it was about your tax or something that was affecting you locally. And the ombudsman was kind of a bridge between you and the state, almost, you and the king, someone that you could almost petition, give them your problems, and that person would then commit to try to resolve it for you. So, yeah, and obviously globally, ombudsman schemes in different sectors and different jurisdictions have grown up in different ways. So we're quite fortunate in this country that there are 20, 25 different schemes, but there are still gaps. Other parts of the world, obviously, in emerging nations, there is no form of dispute resolution other than taking your dispute or your complaint to the court, which we all know is cumbersome, very uncertain, and always very expensive.
So you're basically, you offer a free service where you provide sort of an objective oversight. You'll consider both sides of whatever the dispute is, and then make a recommendation, come to a decision. Now, do you say who's right and who's wrong, and do you make recommendations for what should happen as well? So do you go like, Louise needs to have £500 back, or her sofa sorted out? What's the actual practical?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I guess the only thing that I'd probably take issue there is that we don't talk about who's right and who's wrong. We're led on the evidence. And obviously that can be a challenge because I guess whether it's a court process or a dispute resolution, alternative dispute resolution process, it's for the person that asserts to prove their case. And sometimes that obviously that consumer, that person might be right, but they just don't have the evidence to prove it. But that doesn't mean to say that we sit as judge over whether somebody is honest or they're truthful. It's just that we are evidence led. So I think that there's ways that we can help consumers or complainants to gather their evidence to put their case in the best possible light. And once we've got the complainant's evidence and we've got the business's evidence as well, we look at it. First things first, we'll try to mediate. And one of the fascinating things with dispute resolution is that sometimes the parties actually agree on a load of stuff they don't realise they agree on. So that's what we work through first of all, mediation, see if we can try and resolve some of this stuff informally. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. In around 90% of the cases that we look at across the board, we either resolve or close at that stage. We close maybe because there's a lack of evidence, or we've managed to we've managed to produce some kind of conciliated settlement. If we're not able to do that, then we would move it on to an adjudication. And depending on what sector it is, we might rely on independent expert evidence to help influence the decision, to help influence the way that the cards are almost going to fall. And then we'd make a decision based on what we think is fair and reasonable in the circumstances. Companies that are in the dispute resolution ombudsman, furniture and home improvement ombudsman and rail ombudsman are compelled to follow any decision that we make. And there are various ways that we can get a business to act. So what that means is that any consumer that comes to us and is successful in bringing their claim, if we do make a decision, they can rely on the fact that the business will follow it and will abide by the decision we make. But the process isn't binding on the customer. So if we were to find in favour of a business, for example, that doesn't mean to say it's the end of the road for the customer. Customers still can pursue that case in court. But I think even in those instances, the customer is better off for having gone through our process because they're more likely than not to understand a little bit more about their complaint and the legal position they're in, having exhausted the process. Although we're an alternative to the court, we try to mirror the court's expectations on the parties as far as is possible. There's certainly a move at the moment to bring ombudsman and dispute resolution ADR bodies within the court process and to have it almost as a kind of a seamless journey from start to finish. One of the issues with that at the moment is that some ombudsman schemes make decisions based on just what they consider to be fair and reasonable, which I get. I totally understand that, but that doesn't. What that might do is that might mean that an ombudsman might come up with a decision which is completely different to what a judge would. So what we do within our scheme is our staff, the people that stand over our casework, all have some form of legal education or have studied at the bar or done their LPCs, again, so that we're trying to make decisions which everybody can rely on.
Can I ask right? So from a consumer perspective, consumers don't like generally, and I'm going to generalise because some people probably do like to make complaints, but people don't like to make a fuss and make complaints. It's a really daunting situation for people to be in when they have to escalate something up, especially if they haven't been able to get it resolved. So if I can just bring it back, there's a couple of things I just want to just plane up a little bit. So if we talk about it in real terms, so I have work done on my house. There's something goes wrong with work. So say I have an extension done on my house. The extension on my house isn't to the standard I think it should be. And I go back to the builder that's done my extension. We end up at loggerhead, so we can't agree on a solution that we're both happy with. I then push it to the scheme that they're a member of. So they're a member of an organisation that's got a code of practice that says they have to do certain things. They would potentially try and resolve it at that stage. If they weren't then successful and then they're a member of your scheme, they would then push it to the ombudsman for a final decision. If it can't be resolved throughout those code, then it goes to you as sort of the last resort before court.
Yeah, kind of. Depending on the nature of the relationship that we've got with a code scheme, for example,
yeah,
it might be that we revisit some of the earlier negotiations between the parties. Because again, rather than jump straight to an adjudication, we'd still much rather resolve that particular issue through a conciliation, mediation.
Because redress is one of the things that makes consumers more vulnerable at the moment, because not being able to access different redress systems and get their situation sorted out. And also even words like, we use words like mediate, and that basically means you just try and talk to both parties to get people to meet in the middle.
Yeah, I've kind of fallen in the trap myself of talking about mediation and conciliation, and I do try to avoid that because it's not particularly consumer friendly. We don't mediate in the same way that some traditionalists might consider mediation to take place, i.e. in the same room with a mediator, focusing purely on what the outcome of this complaint is going to be. What the traditional sense of a mediation is that we're not going to talk about the history today, and we're not going to talk about the evidence.
It's divorce.
It's
what
kind of,
makes me think about divorce.
That's exactly what I was thinking about. It's like marriage counselling, not that I would know.
Yeah.
Well, divorce mediation, who's keeping what? Who's getting the goldfish? That's what it makes me think about.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And mediation is kind of where do we go from here? Whereas with the process that we undertake, sometimes, obviously, if we're working with a big company, they don't want that to be the end of the line with their customer. You know, part of our process is to get everybody confident with everybody again. Because they want the customer to go back in the future.
Yeah.
And, you know.
And the recommendations as well. They want those passing it on, don't you? Use that particular builder, I use them, I had a great experience with them. You don't want that neggy review.
Exactly. I think that most consumers will assume that things can and do go wrong. And we've probably all, everybody on this podcast has probably been there and can remember the times actually not when things go right, it's when something has gone wrong and how brilliantly a business has reacted to it and put it right. And so going back to what I was saying right at the start of the podcast, where we were talking about giving customers a choice. So something's gone wrong here with us. We're a member of the Ombudsman, so you've now got a choice to talk to somebody independent, and the independent person's going to tell us both what should be done next, as opposed to those companies or the builders or the trade associations that don't have that process, where effectively you're out.
And you support consumers through that. So you would support. So I come to you because I need some help. You would help me write down, put it all together, support me through the process.
That's exactly right. Yeah, and what I'd expect all ombudsman schemes to do that. I think one of the big differences, obviously, with going to an ombudsman versus going to court with a lawyer is a lawyer. A lawyer is your counsel. So when you turn up at your lawyer's office and you've got 10 issues, your lawyer sometimes might talk you down on 8 of those things and say, look, I know you're really passionate about these 10 things, but, in front of the judge, we're not going to go with point 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 because we don't really have any legal footing on that. So let's focus on point 1 and 2. Obviously, you don't have that counsel when you go to an ombudsman because you can represent yourself. So with us, the 10 issues or the 8 issues that might have been set aside by a lawyer before you get into the court are still very much live when you get to an ombudsman. So our staff are all trained to provide that kind of counselling role as well to both parties to help them understand that what's reasonable, what's not reasonable, and what points we're going to go forward on via whether it's the informal part of the process or through the adjudication.
So if I was a consumer, I'd want to check that the business that I'm about to get into a contract with or do business with is part of a ombudsman service or is part of a scheme, or part of a code, part of a provider that provides that dispute resolution service. Do these businesses actively declare that they are part of the service with you?
It's a great question. The first part of that is I, as a consumer, always look for companies that are affiliated in some way to either an ombudsman or a dispute resolution body. You don't want to use it, do you? But it's like an insurance policy. It's there if you need to.
Yeah.
And I think particularly with big ticket items, look, we're all consumers and we all know that when things go wrong with something that you've bought that's cheap, you're more likely to stick it in the bin and buy it again, or, you're not going to cause a fuss. Yeah. But on the big ticket stuff like a kitchen or a bathroom or a sofa, it's a problem for both parties because a company doesn't want to uplift that product and take it back if there's nothing wrong with it. And likewise, it's cumbersome for a customer to stick it in the boot of their car and take it back. So ombudsman schemes for big ticket items are perfect. And in terms of the second part of the question, it goes in fits and starts. So certainly a few years ago, there were multinational companies that we were dealing with that were using the Ombudsman brand in their national newspaper adverts to inspire customers to shop with them. Again, it's not an endorsement to say that nothing's going to go wrong here, but it's a very, very public declaration to say, come with us, come and shop with us, and if something does go wrong, somebody's going to tell us both how we.
Another question from me around. So we talk about the fact that this all goes through, the ombudsman make a decision about a particular case, and the business is compelled to stick to that decision. How do you make them, and what happens if they don't?
Okay, it's a great question. So, and that really largely comes back to, do ADR bodies and do ombudsman schemes that really have teeth and can.
It's like a toothless tiger.
Yeah.
That's what I was like. Oh, you tick. Yeah.
It's that kind of thing. So if I speak generically about ombudsman schemes across the board, some schemes are underpinned by statute and they work in regulated sectors. So in those regulated sectors, it wouldn't be uncommon for a regulator to license a business, for example, to operate in that sector. So rail is a great example here. The rail regulator licenses train operating companies, and as a condition of their license, they have to be part of the rail ombudsman. And part of that condition is that if the rail ombudsman makes a declaration via an adjudication, they have to follow the decision. In other sectors where there isn't a mandatory ombudsman, so furniture and home improvement ombudsman is another example, our decisions in that scheme are binding, and they're binding because the scheme is signed up to our code of practice, and the code of practice under the Consumer Protection from Unfair Trading regulations compels the business to follow the code of practice. So in our code of practice, I think it's point 9 says that in the event of an unresolved dispute, the company will follow the decision of the Furniture and Home Improvement Ombudsman. So it's that piece of legislation that effectively underpins our adjudication work. So it's a curious one that companies aren't mandated to join the Furniture and Home Improvement Ombudsman, but it's the ultimate commitment if they do, because at the point that they do join, our decisions are binding on.
So I've had a look on your website, and it talks a lot about how the Ombudsman service can raise industry standards, and how having these dispute resolution services, these redress schemes, these codes, and how they can really increase the standards of the products and the services that we get in the UK. Can you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. So I guess, again, one of the key differences between an ombudsman or an ADR body and the courts is that although the courts do a great job in providing justice, once a case goes through that court process, the data and the information from it is lost. It's gone then. It's kind of into the ether. Whereas with an ombudsman scheme, every single case will be analysed, either following the conclusion of a case between the ombudsman and the company at a future date, or we would pick up the themes that have gone wrong and we would train on it. So every single case, that regardless of whether it goes fully in favour of a customer or a business, the themes and the learnings from it are used and pushed back into industry so that they can improve for the future. And I think that's a big, and that's not just this ombudsman scheme, that's all ombudsman schemes.
I also want to talk about the football one, because I knew
we were going there.
I am a keen football fan, I have to say. I kind of wanted to know, what kind of complaints do you get around the football part of the job that you do?
It's a great question, Adam. In football, emotions run high, and those kind of cases are very, very different to any of the other cases that we look at across the other ombudsman schemes. Typically, some of the stuff that we look at in the Independent Football Ombudsman is around ticketing or issues where football supporters have been excluded from grounds for breaching the rules at football matches. So, and obviously, when you lose your season ticket or when you're no longer admitted into a football ground, for those individuals, it kind of feels a little bit like a loss of, well, it does. It feels like a loss of liberty. They might be going to a football ground for their whole life. Might have been going with their granddad and their father before. So it's a big part of everybody's life going to football. So those cases can be very emotional. But the scheme's been operating since 2008. We stand over approximately 300 cases probably a year, which you might not consider a lot, considering the amount of football at football matches in this country.
What's your most memorable football case?
Well, the interesting thing about actually the Independent Football Ombudsman is the adjudications are published online. So all of the cases that we actually adjudicate on, you can read up. So the most memorable case, I mean, they're all memorable really for their own reasons. We've done some cases before where supporters have been brought in issues abroad. So those cases are complicated because we are potentially dealing with police forces from overseas. We're looking at witness statements from supporters that might not always be in touch with each other once they get back to this country.
So whilst we are talking about cases, so actual real life cases that have gone through the dispute resolution service, have you got one that sticks in your mind that is one of your most memorable cases?
I mean, there's been tens of thousands of cases probably since I took over. I remember there's one slightly amusing one where we were working with an independent expert witness it was on a furniture case probably 10 years ago, and the report came back from the inspector, from the witness, and it said that the home was more like a zoo than a home. So I read it and I thought, it's a bit inflammatory, that kind of language. Maybe going to contact him and ask whether or not he wants to refine his words or kind of rein that in a little bit. And so a member of our staff phoned him and he said, let me send you the photos. And when he sent the photos through, there was a parrot and a little monkey sat on the edge of the sofa.
So it's an actual description rather than actually embellishment. Brilliant.
I think he probably could have gone a little bit further than he did, to be honest. But yeah, there was this kind of little, it looked like a monkey kind of just perched on the end of the sofa. And yeah, this parrot that was kind of just uncaged and at free roam. So that's one that stuck in my mind. I mean, they're all obviously every case is important to the consumer who's bringing that case. I think one of the things that I learned about in furniture, before I went into the job, I was probably a little bit naive, didn't really know what could possibly go wrong with furniture. But actually, when you start to see the cases up close, you start to realise that if somebody's bought a bed and the bed's faulty, first things first, they can't sleep at night. So it's not it's not great for your emotional state when you can't sleep and it's expensive. And it's the same with sofa downstairs. It's on your mind constantly. There's an issue with it. You come down the stairs in the morning, first thing you look at is your sofa. So these complaints, regardless of kind of what sector or what it is,
they're big money, aren't they? As well. Also, do you know what I didn't know? And this sounds really naive. That if you don't sleep, you die. I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either, actually.
I didn't know that.
Is that not obvious?
Well, no, obviously not, because I'm degree educated, Adam. I'm not I just didn't know that I just didn't think that
why do you think we sleep? What is the reason for us sleeping then?
Know.
I might use that as my excuse next time I need a lie-in.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I've got to sleep or I might die.
But I just thought, I didn't know that. that was my thought of the day. No, but with the big investments as well, people get emotionally invested in what their houses look like with sofas and things like that. I remember I used to do negotiation, old school, when it was buy with confidence, and I worked at East Sussex Trading Standards, and I remember spending a huge amount of time at a consumer's house looking at their they'd had tiles fitted outside tiles, and the tiles had weathered, but they weren't happy with the colour. And obviously the tiles are different and weathered differently depending on where they were. But the consumers were so passionate about the difference in the colour, and it does get to a point where you have to go, you're being a little bit unreasonable, but people get very, very passionate about things. And I can imagine that with a sofa as well, or a bed sleeping wise, but also sofas and things, and constantly having to see something that is the wrong colour or faded or isn't quite right would drive you a little bit cracker sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, it's complicated, isn't it? Because sometimes you select a sofa from a shop, don't you? And you go in and you try it out, and then 10, 12 weeks later when it arrives, you might have imagined it looked different. It was going to look different in your living room compared to when you're buying some furniture or a product online, and it might not quite resemble the photo. Or, when it actually arrives, in your head, it kind of, everybody's kitchen is bigger in their head, isn't it? And everybody's living room, and what's the impact of this stuff? Well, one of the things that which always does fascinate me though, is that sometimes customers want to know or want to feel like they haven't been ripped off. So sometimes, for example, I know we're getting kind of down on the detail in terms of furniture, but furniture comes in all different kinds of fabrics. And it reacts in different ways to your backside, doesn't it? If you're sitting on a sofa a lot, it wears in different ways. And sometimes your customer just wants to know that, does everybody's sofa? Is this what happens to everybody's? So sometimes
It's like some people have house trousers. This is another thing that blew my mind. House trousers.
That's pajamas,
Those
right?
people, those people definitely shop at Waitrose, but they've got house
Waitrose version of
trousers.
pajamas.
Yeah, but then they're the only ones that you can wear. And if you want to sit on their sofa, you have to borrow a pair of house trousers.
No, shut up. No chance. No chance.
Seriously?
No way.
Seriously? Yes, way.
I would not be friends.
What
I'm not
happened?
friends with anyone like that. Thank God.
Imagine you come round like tomorrow, I'm like, Adam, no sitting down unless you put on your guest house trousers. You
Straight
go,
out the door.
"Get out."
Cancel friendship. Cancel business. See you later.
But no, it's true, isn't it? Like the consumer, and also I think a lot of it, when people complain, it's about being heard, isn't it? So back to that sort of vulnerability piece. You've invested a lot of money, a lot of time selecting something. People want to feel like they've actually been heard and acknowledged.
Definitely, yeah, absolutely. Just going back to your house trousers a bit. A few years ago, we were working with a
If you say you have got house trousers, Kevin, we won't be friends anymore.
currently sat in my house trousers. A few years ago, we worked with a number of retailers, but we work with retailers who don't just sell furniture; they sell other products as well. And there's one particular business that we were working with a few years ago. A customer bought a cream-coloured sofa, but the sofa started turning pink. And the business said, "Look, there's no fault with the sofa. So the sofa's not turning pink; it's being contaminated by something that's that you're wearing." And but the fabric was examined and an inspection was conducted on the sofa to satisfy everybody that it wasn't the sofa. So when we spoke to the business, we said, "What do you think's doing that then?" So they said, "Well, it must be some kind of dye transfer from the customer's clothes, must be from their pajamas or something like that." So. But the pajamas have been bought from the same retailer. So one way or the other, the product was contaminating their other products.
Brilliant.
I thought you were going to say it's some kind of spray tan.
Spray tan.
Really interesting. And obviously you cover like a vast selection of different topics as well in your job. So your job must be really interesting. But from a consumer perspective, because obviously we are consumer friend and we're trying to make these systems easier for consumers to understand and to access, what would be the one thing that you would want people to take away from this podcast?
I'd want them to get in touch. If there's anybody listening that are in dispute or they don't know what to do or they don't know whether or not their case would be eligible for us, contact us or look at us online. We've got lots of help guides on our websites which will guide consumers or, in fact, trading standards officers who are representing consumers in using our process. Again, even if they're no good, phone us. Our staff are really friendly. They're there to help. Get in touch with us and we will guide you through the process and we'll tell you whether or not the issue that you're standing over or that you've got is in or out of scope with us. So just get in touch.
Perfect. And on the Consumer Friend website, there will be a short blog piece on what is an ombudsman and just summarising some parts of the podcast that we've discussed today if people find reading easier than listening to us waffling on, as my 13-year-old would say.
I'll also stick a link to the website, disputeresolutionombudsman.org, on the notes below in the podcast, and it will be on that blog post as well. Kevin, thank you so much for being with us today. And everyone, obviously, Consumer Friend is still available online at consumerfriend.org.uk. Please like, subscribe to the podcast, leave a review where you can. Kevin, thank you very much. Any final words?
Just thanks for having us on, and I'd look forward to coming on again in the future if you'd have me.
Of course.
Excellent. 100%. Definitely.
Louise, thank you very much.
Always a pleasure, Ad.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
This is Consumer Friend.